All right, just started recording.
Awesome.
Okay, you guys see my screen okay?
Yeah.
I do.
Okay, should we just start over? Just start from the top, Vince?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to show you, so like we talked about last time, Sage 100, it's got a lot of drill down capabilities to it. And so I'm just going to show you kind of a smattering of the different screens and how they, you know, in real life, how they're going to affect you guys. So if I pull open, for example, like a GL account, now you can see right here, they've got multiple segments to this account number. I think you've got up to like 45 or 60 spaces for your account number. Heaven forbid you use that many, you know, segments and numbers in your chart of accounts. But so you've got lots of room to grow. A common place that people come is like if you're looking at a GL account and trying just to see what's going on, you know, you've got your historical tab that does it by month, and then you've got a variance where you can compare like year over year or year to budget or whatever. And then the transaction tabs is where you can actually look at all the debits and credits that have hit the ledger.
Okay.
And then you can come in, double click on something and see the full debits and credits for where something came from. And then it'll tell you right there, like there's the check number and the vendor number that that transaction had come from. And so, like I said, there's just a commonplace on the GL side that people come just to drill into stuff and to look into it. And so with the budgets, you can maintain, I think, an unlimited number of budgets within Sage 100. And then you'll compare them, add them to your financial statements, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So then another drill down screen, it kind of just helps give you kind of a good idea of the look and feel of Sage 100. So for example, if I just pull up a customer number, so one thing that's different than Sage 50, I'll point out some differences with Sage 50 as well, because there's, I think, a good number of real qualitative enhancements that Sage 100 has. So one of them is that your search functionality is much stronger in Sage 100. Sage 50, typically they'll give you like a couple different fields that you can search, and then if you can't find it in those, then good luck, you know, and you're kind of on your own trying to find stuff. So you can see right here, by default, I can see these different fields that are available just across the top that I can search by. So if I had the, you know, phone number, I could say, you know, phone number contains 8655, click find, and then it's going to filter based off of that. So you can search by these 6 fields right here. But Sage 100, pretty much anytime there's a search button, so anytime there's a magnifying glass, you can come in and actually create your own permanent lookups that then can include a whole bunch of fields in there. So if you think about a customer has a lot of information, right? It's got address, city, state, zip, email, website, tax schedule, salesperson. So as I scan through here, this is basically looking through the whole back-end table that's tied to that customer, just with all these different fields. So I can add any of those in as columns that will then appear here across the top in my search screen.
Right.
And then down here in the search right here, then I can use any of those. So basically, any field that you can see on the customer screen, you can search by it when you hit the magnifying glass. And so you can, Sage 100 you'll find is much, much, much more customizable than Sage 50. And so I'm not actually going to go through, I mean, it takes about 30 seconds to set one up, but you can basically just double click, add your fields over. Okay, I'll just finish it. So you see now I've got standard view in this test view that I just created. And now if I scroll across the top, you see it's got all these additional fields that I just added onto there. And I could search by any of those. And it's permanent, right? Once it's set up, then it's there for all time, and carries over with upgrades and all that kind of stuff. And that's not just for customers. That's, you know, sales orders, inventory items, GL accounts, anywhere where you've got a magnifying glass, you can do that.
Okay.
So if we look specifically at a customer, you know, you're going to have some things that are similar to Sage 50. You know, of course, you're going to have address and terms code, tax schedule, salesperson, several of those types of things. But some of the, I think more useful things that Sage 100 has, like if I look at like my invoices tab right here, then you can see you can highlight an invoice, and I can just double click on it, and it'll actually drill me into the invoice to look at. So if I wanted to, I could actually hit my print button and then actually, print off a copy of this invoice if I wanted to look at the paper version of it. But I can click on the lines, I can see all the different line items that were included on that invoice. If it came from a sales order, which this one looks like it did, then you can see the sales order number that it's referencing, or that it's basically that the invoice sourced from. And pretty much all your information is saved in a just in a read-only format now, because it's a posted invoice, right? So you see all this type of information available. You also see down in the secondary grid right here any transactions that have happened against it. And so you can see right here, for example, I've got a payment against that invoice. So it's check number 1234, and I've got some basically a payment. Looks like it's a test check number, but a payment that's been issued against that, and you see that right there up in your balance. And and then all of these are sortable, so I can, if I had multiple invoices, I could sort them by dollar amount or by balance remaining or PO number, whatever it may be, and to look through those. If I've got sales orders tied to that customer, then I'd be able to see all the sales orders listed right here on the customer screen as well, and then I could just double click on the sales order, and it would take me into the sales order so that I could modify it or print it or whatever I wanted to do for the customer. So it works really well for like a CSR type role, that customer calls and says, hey, I want to check in on XYZ. So you come in, let them search by whatever makes sense for them to search by, pull up the customer, and then you've got access to the accounting information, to the sales information, et cetera, that's available for that customer. So any questions on that?
Nope. Pretty self-explanatory.
Okay. So vendor screen, you'll notice that the screens, they do a good job of keeping things uniform throughout the system. So vendors is going to be really similar type of information. And so you'll see the tabs look similar, except you've got purchase orders tab instead of a sales orders tab. You've got an invoices tab where you can see, information that's basically flowing in. You can double click on it. You can see adjustments or payments or whatever in that secondary grid. So it's very similar, like I said, to the AR side. They mirror each other for the most part in terms of what's available for them. So I'll jump down. I know that we said that for you guys, GL, AR, and AP is more basic. It's just kind of pretty straightforward stuff. So I'd say let's jump down to inventory and bill of materials and some of these other screens. And I think those will be useful to you guys. So I'll start with item maintenance. You'll notice again it's kind of similar in some regards to the customer and vendor screens, just in the overall look of how things are organized in the system. And so you can have different product types and different types of procurements on it. All of your standard valuation types. So like standard costing, FIFO, LIFO, average, lot costing, serialized costing. Pretty much, those are all the main ones. So they're all included, in the package. You can assign different items, inventory items, to different inventory cycles. If you're doing cycle counts on stuff, you can set up primary vendors. The pricing and costing setup in Sage 100 is a lot more developed than it is in Sage 50. So that goes both in the direction of purchasing from a vendor. So if you've got like price breaks, or 1 through 9 of something, you get a specific price, and then 10 through 49 of something, you get another price from the vendor. Then you can log all those in the system. And and on the pricing side to customers, there's about 12 different ways of pricing stuff as well. So if I just come in and look at some of our existing, let's see if we've got any. Let me set one up. So you can see that when you're setting up your price codes, you can do cost markup amounts. So you know different companies are going to have different ways that they're going to price, right? So it may be markup from cost is how you price it to your customer, or it may be prices and then discounts coming off based off of, let's say, for example, quantity breaks, like we talked about. You can also set up price levels, and so some companies will say, well, some of this may actually not apply to you guys. If you're doing, I mean, a lot of stuff's make to order. So are you guys working from a standard price list, or are your sales reps kind of putting each one together as they go?
Well, let's say I think we have around like 1,500 to 2,000 commercial parts that we buy. A big one that goes on almost every machine is a servo motor, right? So there may be a situation where we buy five of them and get no discount, but then if we buy 7, we get a discount. So there is that situation happening.
Okay, so you got some of both really. So some custom pricing where you're just kind of people are putting it together for the specific machine, but then other parts where you know exactly what your price is going to be for it.
Yeah, I mean, what happens is in certain situations we may be building 2 machines at the same time, right? And they might use the same motor, so that way we have visibility into buying a few more than we normally would.
Gotcha. Okay. So, yeah. So with the pricing, then you know that could be something that you put in the system. Both. So you're, I think, talking more on the purchasing side. You know that if you're buying it from a vendor, you can consolidate, you know, across multiple things, multiple orders, and say, well, let's get 10 of them and save $50 on each one, or whatever.
Yeah. Does that happen through? The other module I saw was the component manager. Is that where that happens? Like where you're able to see everything that's needed from your inventory across multiple jobs, and if you're obviously buying from the same vendor, you can create a PO that grabs everything you need, not just a specific item for a specific job.
That was probably in the operations management module in that video I sent you, more than likely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that's. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I was watching that looked like it could be very helpful for us in the future as we got more accustomed to understanding the inventory flows. It looks like a very useful sort of module.
Yeah. So there's so I'll show you what Sage 100 does out of the box.
Okay.
It's got some stuff that you can get some visibility to that. And then the, what was it? The operations management, you know, product, then that's got different modules in it that basically for make to order manufacturer helps to build out some of that. So, you know, that video, that YouTube link that Brian showed you, that's got, you know, that's going to show additional stuff, but it's basically kind of a plugin for Sage 100.
Okay.
So what I'll show you today is just what you get with core Sage 100, and then we can, you know, also add that other piece in, you know, if it's something that you say, hey, it's worth it, you know, to get that. So, so yeah, so with costs and prices in Sage 100, like I said, you've got quite a bit of flexibility just to price stuff. You can have customers, you know, sometimes companies will have customers that they want to kind of throw into different buckets, like, hey, this is an A-level customer, so they get this price, but this is a C-level customer over here, so they get a higher price. And so you can also do price levels, and then you can do, like I said, there's about 11 or 12 different ways that Sage allows you to price an item to a customer. So lots of flexibility there. Multiple warehouses. I think Sage 50 just allows for one warehouse, and then you kind of have to jury rig it to reflect multiple warehouses. Whereas Sage 100, you can have up to several hundred, several thousand warehouses that you can set up in it. So You get your count down here. You know, what's on hand, what's on sales order, what's on purchase order. So you get kind of a quick screenshot. One thing that Sage 100, especially when you get into the inventory modules, that it's really, really unique in is its ability to customize the system. So you see right here, so standard to Sage 100, you get the custom office module. And what it allows you to do is to basically create new fields. So in Sage 50, it'll give you, like with the vendor and the customer and the item, I think it's 5 fields that it gives you. And they just, I think it calls them custom 1, custom 2, custom 3, custom 4, and custom 5. You know, so it's just kind of real generic text fields where you can throw stuff in. And it, you know, it's useful, but I think this is more useful. Let me go to the right place. Item. So you can come in and actually add completely new fields to the system, you know, to the screen. And so I could say, I don't know. So if we're talking, you know, machine stuff, then I could just say warranty days. Maybe this is how many days it's warranted from the vendor that you purchased it from. That may be a terrible example, but I'm really just trying to show you that you can do different types of fields. So you can say, hey, I want to do a numeric field. So I can make it, you know, whole numbers or decimal numbers from it. Or I may say, well, actually, I want to do a checkbox screen. So I can add a checkbox onto my item screen or my customer or vendor or invoice. Like there's pretty much, you know, the ability to add new fields is on pretty much every screen within Sage 100 that you can add it.
Okay.
And so you can do drop boxes, list boxes, check boxes, text fields, or numeric fields, or date fields. So pretty much every type of field you just see on the screen normally, you can create your own field. And then once you create it, you're in the system. Then if I come back to, let's say, our item screen right here, there's basically an edit mode where I can say, hey, I want to customize this screen right here. And I would come and click right there. And so like there's a little empty space right there. So I could just drag and drop. It's going to bring up a list of all the custom fields that I've created. I could say, oh, I want to throw a part number right there. Oh, it looks like I already added this in somewhere else. So it's actually telling me, you know, you can't do it because it's already added in somewhere else on the screen. But if this was a new field, then I could just add it in right there. I could change my tab.
You can load it in. Yep.
I could change my tab order. So essentially, when it's all said and done, then you end up with a screen that's customized for exactly your needs. And somewhere on here, it's already got that field added in. So wherever it got added to, part number right there. So it looks like that's a custom field right there, and you would never know. Like to an end user, then it just looks, you know, it's right there. Now, other stuff you can do with that is you can actually change it by user. So you can hide it from one user and show it to somebody else. So you can even kind of use it to make some workflows. You know, if you're doing a bill of material and you need like the manager to approve a bill of material, you know, or say that it's been approved or whatever, just different stuff like that. You could add a field onto a BOM with a checkbox that says approved by manager, but only the manager can check the box, you know, and just different stuff like that. You can get really creative in terms of what you want to add and then how you can use it to function. And then we talked about the magnifying glass, how you can add fields into your search screens. Any of your custom fields can also be added into the search screens. So we had a tire distributor, you know, that did this. They added like 60 fields onto their item screen. So they could do like, how many lug nuts does it have? What's the tire diameter? What's the weight of the tire? What's the mileage of the tire? You know, all sorts of stuff that was really important for them to know and to track. So they put all that into Sage 100 under the inventory item. And then you can also pass this information over to a sales order so that when you print it off, it automatically fetches the information from the item and then displays it, for example, to the customer on the sales order. So you can use the information and then get really creative with kind of where it all goes. So, so then you get a detailed screen that gives you a quantity on hand, the history of that item, how has it moved, what have been the sales and everything been. You can come to customer specific information and say, well, hey, for this specific customer and this specific item, what have my sales been? Or vendor and item number. You can come to right here, you would see all of your transactions. So you can see there's a couple of transactions in here. Double click on it, it's actually going to take me to the invoice that transaction was sourced from. So I'd see, okay, well, yeah, it looks like I quantity of 1 went down because I had a sales order invoice number right there. So I invoiced it, sent it out to the customer. That's why my quantity went down. So you can drill into it.
Oh, okay.
And then if you got any POs or sales orders that are referencing that item, then you can of course click right here and see the sales orders. So there's a sales order that's referencing it, or you've got a purchase order that's potentially referencing it.
Okay.
And so in any case, a lot of drill downs, and then right here, I'll skim through these. Stop me if you want me to go into more detail on them. But you can add multiple vendors on, like prices for multiple vendors. You can set up alias part numbers. So this is interesting because you can take you can say, well, hey, when I order this part number, like, does my customer use a different part number than I do? Or does my vendor use a different part number for this than I do? So you can make it so that you can have a purchase order. You put in your number that you're familiar with, but it will automatically print the vendor's PO number that they always use for that item that you're ordering, or vice versa for your customer. So you can track, we call it alias item numbers in the system. You can set up alternates if you want. So if I'm out of stock of this one, it'll automatically prompt you for an alternate item that you could use. You can set up reorder points, for what's my minimum, what's my maximum, what's my reorder quantity, etc.
Yep.
And then we've talked quite a bit about pricing. You can do sales promotions. You've got lot or serial costing. You got those available. If it's tied to a BOM, then right here you've got bill of material maintenance, where you can actually drill just directly to the bill that matches that item code. So if you've got something that you got an engine and it uses 10 widgets to build that engine, then you'd have your engine part number right here, but you could drill down to the BOM and see what the component parts are that come into it. So
now
questions.
Now we're starting.
Go ahead.
Yeah, now we're starting to get into elements that are very specific to like what we do, right? So let's say we're building a cartoner, right? And the engineer releases the BOM, right? Okay, so if you go into the bill of materials, and the BOM is essentially made up of standalone parts and assemblies, which require other parts to build that assembly, right? Like just a simple situation where assembly 1, 2, 3 requires a motor, an electrical wiring, some sort of like transmission, something like that to complete that assembly.
Right. Yep. So let's spend some time looking at bills. So when you set up a bill, then of course you have kind of like I'm just going to call them the master item code. So you got what we'll call master and then component items. And the master item is basically what's being built out of that BOM. So
do you mind if I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
So in theory, the way I look at this, right? So customer submits purchase order, right? And then we issue them a sales order with their machine on it, right? So say it's sales order for a cartoner, and at that point in time, you do the breakdown of the price, right? So I would imagine that sales order says Cartoner A, and then you start to build out what goes into Cartoner A, right?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways that you can go about it. Like when it depends on what you want to display to the customer. So
okay.
So when you display it to the customer, this is a question. Do you guys want to see it as, do you basically just put like one line item to the customer that says, hey, we're building you a motor, and then you guys are going to come in and kind of build it?
Yeah, so currently we don't issue sales orders, but we do track them internally, and how they're tracked is that the presentation of it will have the breakdown of the payments on it. So the 50, 40, 10, and then another line for installation, something along those lines, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do you ever give the customer a sales order from the system, or you're just giving them kind of some external document that you guys have?
Yeah, it's something external, but if we were able to do it seamlessly, we could definitely issue it to them.
Okay, and so, but I'm guessing that in terms of from an inventory standpoint, if you were to have a sales order, so if that motor, is what's being built, basically you're going to take the motor, and the motor is going to go on the sales order, and you're going to say, hey, this motor is going to cost you, $5,000 to build this motor, and or like, do you build them? Because I know in the end so you've got your machine or your whatever you're manufacturing that's including a bunch of component items, but when you I guess what do you want to display on the sales order internally? Do you want it to be like the top item, like the master item that's being constructed, and then you're going to use bill of materials and inventory to basically manufacture it to that point? I mean, to me, that's kind of what it sounds like. And then you just have one line item on the sales order potentially that says, hey, this whole thing costs you $50,000, but you know that it's got a BOM tied to it, and you got to go through the manufacturing on it. Does that sound accurate?
Right. So say the sales order says horizontal Cartoner HS1-2, right? That's what gets shown, and then you break down the payments for it, however you want to do it. And then I imagine that you have to add horizontal Cartoner HS1-2 to your inventory, and then you add a bill of materials to that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I can't buy that. I have to make that.
Correct. Yeah. So and that's how you do it in the system, is you set up the inventory item. Because generally speaking, on a sales order, you don't want to ship it out of the system. Shipping is kind of equates to invoicing. You're not going to take inventory out of your system until you've manufactured it, until you know what the cost is and everything. And then as soon as you've finished manufacturing that item, then you can invoice it in the system, which will take it out of inventory, recognize your revenue, your cost of sales on it, and then send the invoice out to the customer. And so, yeah, it sounds to me like that works. They may care about what the components of that of that machine are, which so you could display it on the form that goes out to them and just say, hey, pull up this ORA-00001 bill, just so they can see what exactly the parts are. That make up that item, but you don't have to, right? You could just hide it and just say, hey, you bought a machine and it cost you $50,000, and just quantity of one, price of $50,000, total invoice $50,000. And so that's I'll kind of display this, like as we go through this, I'll kind of walk it through under those circumstances, and if we want to change it, then we can. But that's just how I'll kind of walk through the process initially, just so we can kind of see what's going.
So like in the screen that I'm looking at right now, this bill of materials, right?
Yeah.
Like how does this end up getting connected to the sales order then?
Gotcha. I'll just pull up a sales order.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to take some defaults in here. So basically, generally how it works is, in this case, we are doing like a make to order type of thing. You're going to talk to the customer and get some sort of, idea of what needs to be done, right? They're going to say, okay, well, we figured it out, it needs to have these specs on it. And you're going to say, okay, great, we're going to put together a BOM for it. So in order to have, if I just like type in something new on here, then it's going to ask me, is this a new inventory item code? And so in order to even add something onto sales order, it has to be set up here, right? Now I can give people rights to set up an inventory item here or I can prevent them from doing it. Like, you can control who's going to actually be setting up the BOMs and the inventory items. But if I said yes, then it's going to open up the inventory screen and say, okay, well, give me all the information I need, on this. And so, heck, let's just do this. We're going to call this events. We'll just do one on the fly. And so there's a couple pieces of kind of core information that you'd want to, assign. What is the product line, which basically that controls all the GL postings for revenue, cost of sales, etc. I don't know if I didn't mention it, I don't think prior, but I've got a degree in accounting. So when it comes to debits and credits, don't feel like you have to hold back on any debits and credits questions.
Okay.
But basically you set up this item, and as soon as I hit OK on there, it will now let me move forward with adding that to a sales order. And actually, if I come in here and look at my screen I've had open the whole time, I can now see that I've got a Vince item in my inventory. So it's set up right there. So that allows you just to get it on a sales order. Now, the second question becomes, well, I don't have any Vince on hand right now, right? I've just got 0 on hand because it's a new item. And so in that case, then if you wanted to manufacture that in order to bring up your quantity on hand to whatever you want to ship out on it, and that's where you would come in and say, okay, well, I'm going to actually set this up as a new item. So I'm just going to leave it empty for now. I can come through and add line items to it. We can do this as an example. But this is the point at which you're actually telling the system, okay, well, I'm going to create a bill for my Vince item code so that so I can use this in order to build some Vinces and bring my inventory quantities up that will then allow me to fill whatever quantity, is being ordered right here for the customer. So you could say, okay, go ahead.
So in the item maintenance screen.
Yeah.
So you're saying, so it would be, say it was, you had to make it, right? So it's like, it's like a mixture. So can you click the drop down on procurement? I just want to understand the flow, right? So you'd obviously have to make this. And then how is the bill of materials connected to the Vince item code? How do those actually connect?
So if I put in, if I just put in some bill number that doesn't have a corresponding item code, then it's actually going to say, well, what type of bill is this? So there's a couple other types of bills that you can do, which based off our initial conversation, I don't think you'd use these, but you can see right there, because that's not an item that exists in our inventory. So it thinks that that's going to be a new item code. So it's already prompting me saying, well, hold on, this doesn't exist. That bill number doesn't exist anywhere. If I put in something that's an item code that already exists, or if I just hit my magnifying glass right there, then you can see it's going to allow me to basically do anything where it's got an item code already in the system. It just knows. It says, hey, what is a standard bill that allows me to basically build more of these into inventory. But it's only when you put just some new number that doesn't exist in your item code, then it's going to say, well, and if I say, well, it's a new item code, then it's going to take me through the item screen and say, well, hey, in order to add that as a bill, you've got to set up the item first. So there's always a one-to-one relationship between the item existing there and having a standard bill of materials to build that item.
Oh,
does that answer your
okay,
question?
So yeah, you're essentially saying that the link between the two is going to be the item code.
In our scenario, yes, it's always going to be referential.
Okay.
Like you have to have one and you have to have the other.
Okay.
Well, you can have items without having a bill tied to them, but any bill, any standard bill type right there has to have an item tied to it.
Okay, makes sense.
So then as you go through, so you'll notice right here, you can have different revisions of a bill number. And so this is kind of an interesting thing. I mentioned the other company that basically was kind of doing something real similar to you guys. What they'll have is they'll build, one of their basically machines, and they'll call it, let's say, well, this is the XYZ. But you can really have, for them, they can have 100 different versions of that XYZ, right? With a whole bunch of different variations for different customers that want, a stronger engine or a larger valve or whatever component piece it is that's changing. And so to keep it in inventory, they're going to say, well, once that's sitting in inventory, that's just going to be an XYZ. But they may have, 50 different revisions of that item. And then they just do them all as the same, master item code that's being created because it's good enough for them. It's a low enough. They're doing high dollar, low volume, and so that works for them. Just to be able to dump them all into the same item code. But in any case, so I wanted just to point out, first of all, you can have multiple revisions on there, and then you can say, when you manufacture this, if you're doing more of it probably doesn't apply to you guys. But you've got yield percentage, which is if you're putting together soup powder, then you're going to have a certain amount of waste, every time you do a bill of material. And you can do some yield percentages on there. But you come down to right here, and this is where you add all of your component item codes. So this is just looking at all of your inventory items. Yep. I could say, well, it's going to have, 3 of those, and it's going to have 10 of these. Right, this is where you go through, and this is the guts of your BOM that you're creating. Yep. And you had said, well, what about, can we add labor? I think is what you'd mentioned, saying, well, can we add other stuff in? So they have what are called miscellaneous item codes. And so if we said, I'm just going to call this professional services, and I could say, well, this requires 2.5 hours of professional services, to go on to here. You'll see right there from a cost standpoint, it's hitting, we've got it set up basically to hit kind of this is going to be your G&A payroll, or excuse me, your, this could be cost of sales. I mean, it's wherever you want to classify it to, but you basically are going to put it into a GL account, which is then going to offset potentially your payroll expense or whatever else. You're basically, you got payroll that's hitting an account, and then this is coming back out and saying, hey, let's scrape that cost out of that bucket because it's now moving into inventory cost, that where it's going to sit on our books as inventory. And so you can set up, thousands of these different codes if you want, and make that part of the BOM. And then every time you create this BOM, it's going to use the cost from that item in the system, and the cost from that item in the system, and the cost from this service in the system. Or I guess in this, there's no cost for the service. It's an internal item that you're creating, but you can give it a value that it basically will then roll up into this item with. So basically this item, when it gets created, assumes the costs of the totals, of all of these items that are basically being created in the system. And so you go through, add all your stuff in, and like we said, I can say accept. So I now have my vince saved in the system. And if I wanted to say, well, let's do a different variation of that, I could say, well, hey, let's copy that from my vince revision 0. So then it copies all this stuff in, but I could say, you know what, this is a slightly different version. So we're going to add, one other specific part on there. this specific revision number is going to have. And so basically, as you go through and you can create your different variations of your vents. And once your bill of material is created, then to manufacture it, then you actually just come over to right here. So in the bill of materials module, you've got a production entry. The disassembly entry is just the opposite. So it's like if you build something and you realize it was a mistake, you can disassemble it.
Yep.
It's just basically the opposite of the production entry. I'd come in, and this is when your manufacturing process is complete on those items. Then you just give it a production number. You say, well, I'm building that revision of vents. I'm going to build 2 of them for this. And then, whatever date, where are the components coming from warehouse-wise, where is the item being manufactured to, inventory-wise. And then you can see right there, I'm doing 2 of them. So it's got quantity of 2. So it's 2 times 10, 2 times 3, 2 times 2.5. So I get my extended quantity. And then I basically just go through, and then I would post this manufacturing item right here. And as soon as I close this, you can see right there, it's hitting. We didn't assign a unit cost yet.
Yeah,
I'd have to assign a unit cost to that item, but you get your math coming through. That becomes the new cost that is then going to be hitting for that vent item. That's what it will sit in inventory with.
Okay.
You go to update, say yes. I'm going to skip that. That's just posting to the GL right there. We'll skip that step for now. So if I come back now and look at my vents item, then you can see my quantity on hand is now 2. Because I just went through and manufactured 2 of those. If I look at my transactions on here, then you can see there's a bill of materials register. There's the reference number, the quantity, there's the cost that I can see it sitting in there with. And I haven't posted to the GL yet, so can't see the GL entry on it. But yeah, so in any case, you get your item created, so that now when I've got my sales order, I actually will now have, I put 5 on my sales order, but I manufactured 2. So let's assume I was smart and actually manufactured the same number as what I'd ordered or what the customer had ordered. But then from that point, as soon as you're ready to ship out the sales order, you just go through the shipping process and then invoice the customer. And then as soon as you post this invoice, the sales order invoice, it's going to take this item for whatever your costing method is out of inventory at this cost, that we saw displayed over here. Your revenue will be hit for whatever your price was on there. So as soon as you go through and invoice it, then you end up with now with your final product. Basically, inventory was manufactured, inventory went back out, customers got their invoice, and then you're just to your standard AR, collection process on there. So we can talk about deposits in just a second, but wanted to kind of stick with just bill material and inventory, before we get into that. So any questions on this?
Nope, no questions.
Okay. Do you want me to point out, additional stuff with it, or should I move on to sales orders and talk about those more?
No, we can move on.
Okay. So with sales orders, so we've got, you got a customer that it's tied to, shipping information that you can track in the system, of course. And then like we talked about, your line items is kind of where the guts of the sales order are going to be. Now, you'll notice that in many of the screens for Sage 100, it's got like what they call a primary grid and a secondary grid. And it allows you to take items and drag and drop stuff that you care about or don't care about. And so, for example, right here, this cost code, this is actually if you tie something to a job number, like for job costing.
Yes.
That's related to that. So if I care about that, I could leave that on. Or maybe I say, well, I never do back orders because everything's make to order, so back orders are extremely, extremely rare. So I'm going to say, you know what, just put that back down there. I don't even need to see it. So you can drag and drop those. It'll save it by user. And again, just the system really allows you to mold it to whoever is using it and kind of how they want to see things. Right. So as you go through this process, there's a couple different ways that I've seen people and how they want to register their deposits on an order. And this is actually a discussion that I had with this other company, because there's, if you think about it, at the point that it's a sales order, for all intents and purposes, any money that you take against it, it's right. Essentially it's a prepaid deposit, it's a customer deposit. It's not really a receivable, right? And so some companies I've seen where they'll still just go in and create an AR invoice and display that invoice, to the customer and say, well, here's your invoice, you got to pay it. But then if you post it through AR, then it's actually showing up in your aging, and so this company that we had worked with, they said, well, we don't really want to see it on aging because it's kind of confusing to us to say, well, what's really aging versus what's a deposit, for an order, which are kind of two different things. And if we look at our aging report, do we want to see them both on there? They decided it would just as soon put deposits on a sales order. And what this allows you to do is, so if I just said this 1, 2, 3, 4 is our check number, I'm going to say we're going to take $1 million deposit on this, so it's 50%. Then basically what happens now is, so that's a custom field that we added on here for FOB, and we made it required so that they had to put something in there. You can see on their sales order, it says it's for $2 million, but then down at the bottom, you've got a deposit amount, right? And so if you do a 50% deposit or 40% deposit, we can continually kind of update the sales order so that it will display that information, so that you're basically taking deposits and then the customer's seeing what they've paid and what's remaining, still on that invoice. But the kind of the side, benefit to that. So when you put a deposit here, we'd go through this in training a little bit more.
Yeah.
But you take this $1 million deposit right here, you'd actually go into the AR module and you'd receive that $1 million just through a standard cash receipt process. But rather than booking it to like an invoice, then what you do is you book it to a GL account, which is going to be your like a prepaid deposits GL account. So you basically just get it sitting on your balance sheet as prepaid money from customers that's sitting there. It hit your cash account, like it's showing up on your bank rec and all that kind of stuff. But it's not being applied against an invoice. It's not showing up against your aging balance. It's just sitting there in a GL account. Hey, I received $1 million and it's sitting there in my account, on the balance sheet. Then once you invoice the sales order, then it will come through and it will take whatever the deposit amount is on that sales order, and it offsets that prepaid deposits account. So your prepaid deposits GL account becomes kind of like this in and out, where it's when you take the money in, it sits in there, and as soon as you invoice the sales order back out, then it will see that entry. It takes whatever your deposit amount is and books it back to that account to wash it back out. And then whatever your remaining balance is what actually goes to an invoice. So for you, this would probably be the 10% invoice. So that 10% invoice would then go out to the customer. That's the actual invoice, to them. That's actually aging on your accounts receivable report. And then you just collect it like a normal AR transaction. And
yeah.
So one thing go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we will invoice every part of the job, even the down payment or deposit as you're going through here. It will actually have an invoice before we receive any funds.
Okay, and so there's a couple ways that you can do that. You can just go straight to AR and do a similar thing. It's like, well, do you want it hitting revenue? Probably not, because your sales order, like as soon as this item, this is invoiced, that's creating the revenue line. And so generally what you see, what companies are going to do is they're going to say, well, when everything is said and done, let's see, I got two of those. When everything is said and done, then they'll just go up to the AR module, just create some invoices just to get payment coming in on those. But for the GL account that the line items hit on the invoice, then they'll do those to a prepaid deposits account. So kind of a similar type thing. And then as soon as you get the whatever coming through on this side on the sales order, then the sales order, like before you send, before you post the sales order and ship it, then you would just say, hey, here's how much we've taken in deposit on that. So you're still using the sales order to kind of wash out, the prepaid deposits amount, but you're just basically telling it what account to wash those out against. And yeah, so it's, there's the exact same discussion that we had with this other company. They decided that they wanted to keep it off their accounts receivable because their deposits, it's like if the customer doesn't deposit, there's no receivable. They just never start the order for them. But if you guys want to do it as AR, then that's what you do, is that's probably what you're doing already, is creating an AR invoice, sending it out to them, and then just collecting afterwards, and then letting your sales order kind of reflect that in the system. So
yeah, for us, we would record that invoice through deferred revenue. So I assume there's a way to set the default for invoices connected to jobs to deferred revenue as opposed to revenue, right?
Well, it depends on, so if you're just doing a standard invoice, it's just going to allow you to choose, so you can, and actually I think we can, so on the customer screen, you can set default for, so a default item code right there. So I could say, well, hey, this is going to be, deposit, for example. And then we can say, so for anytime I create an invoice, like an AR invoice for that customer, that's going to be the default line item that pops up on that invoice. So you can set a default in that sense. And then on the invoice, the AR invoice that you're creating, you still got to give it the dollar amount of whatever's being collected on it, but it will save you the step of having to type in deposit on there. It'll automatically insert it. You just put the dollar amount, and then you can print off your invoice and call it good. And then these codes right here, so you can see anything that's blue, you can double click on or single click on to drill in. So you can see that you would then just direct that item code to a specific GL account where you want it to deposit to.
Yep.
So if you were to think about your AR invoice that was created, it's going to debit AR, but then it's going to credit this GL account right here. So when you receive cash against, you see the check payment against it, it's just AR and cash are being hit. But then this amount, this would be what you would correspond over to your sales order. So in the sales order setup, you'd put on your sales order what the total amount is that's been deposited against that. And then as soon as you post the invoice on here, it'll offset and pull money out of your prepaid or customer deposits or whatever you call your account.
Yeah. Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that works.
And then so it keeps all your revenue and inventory, revenue, AR, cash, etc., in alignment. And so by default, I'll point out, because this was a conversation that I had, with the other company that I mentioned. So by default, Sage will allow you to show one deposit amount in there, which if you're just throwing a total in, then that works just fine. But if you actually want to display individual deposits, on the sales order, then there's an add-on that you can get for Sage that allows you to record, it's like 5 or 10 deposit amounts against one sales order. So you can say, well, just check 1, 2, 3, 4 for this payment, and then 1, 2, 3, 7 for this other payment. If that's something that you wanted to like display on the sales order printout, for example. But,
yeah, that could be helpful.
So I'll make a note of that. Send you a couple of screenshots. But yeah, just keep in mind that out of the box, you just got one deposit field. So this would be like your sum total. But if you've taken two different 50% and 40% payments on a sales order, then maybe having just one check number isn't enough. Maybe you want to have display more than that.
Okay.
So let me just make a quick note of that. So yeah, then you've got the sales order. You can do a pick list, that you can print off, send back to the warehouse. Different companies, they all have slightly different methods of how they get stuff together. Especially when you're doing more complex items, then there's less confusion in back about how to fill the order. If you're dealing with a zillion types of widgets, you got to be really specific on a pick list and say, hey, here's this, it's at this location. Here's that, it's at that location. If you're talking more complex items that, lower quantity, higher dollar value, then oftentimes the warehouse has no problem knowing, what's being shipped to a customer. So, but yeah, if you wanted to do pick lists, then you can certainly, just print them off right here, and you just take your form, print it off, send it in back, let them run with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can go through the invoicing process. I can talk about purchase orders. I don't want to spend time on stuff you don't care about. Just want to make sure that we're kind of covering where you want to cover. So do you want me to keep going and talk about invoicing on here, or do you want me to go to somewhere else?
Yeah, this feels very, very familiar to the Sage 50 platform. What about the job cost module?
Okay, so we come over. Actually, I'm going to leave open or reopen their sales order. Yeah, we talked on our last call about there's a couple different methods for how you can basically track job information with regards to a sales order. And so we said one is if you've got like 10 different sales orders, for example, that may tie to the same, what we'll call job. Or the other one is that we've got like R&D, which is more like you're using the job cost just as kind of a cost sink, where you can throw your costs and classify them in. So if we pull up, we got a test one in here already. So with a specific job setup, then you can create, you got different accounting methods that you can use, because you can actually bill, like do accounts receivable billing out of a job if you want. And if you do that, you can do like percentage of completion and say, hey, it's 50% complete, therefore I'm going to bill the customer 50%. Or you can bill at just the end of the project and bill the whole thing. Okay. And then you can do like, is it fixed amounts, what you're going to bill to the customer, or is it time and material, where you're taking a cost and then marking it up 50% and then billing to the customer, which for you guys, probably not going to use that one. That's more for, a lot of hours intensive type of stuff, like stuff like we do. It would be more appropriate, for saying, well, we've got this many hours, it costs this much to the business, but we're going to charge the customer this much.
Yeah, we'll always bill fixed.
Yeah. And so then when it comes to, there we go, the actual cost codes, then you can set up different cost codes for an item that are basically going to start tracking information for costs that are being recognized against this. Now, costs can come from a few different places. So if you think about like accounts payable, like somebody goes on a flight or whatever, and it's going to be billed against a project, then that's probably flowing through like on a credit card, most likely. So it's just going to go straight through AP and not really on a PO or a sales order. And so in that case, on the AP line item, then there is so on an AP invoice entry, then I could select a job number to cost something against. And then the cost code is basically kind of a breakdown. That's, you got your job, but then what are all the different, buckets within the job that you want to track, or be able to break out. So I could say, well, that's going to be valuation. And then you put your dollar amount on that AP invoice. So it's a standard AP invoice in that regard, except that it's actually tracking a job number and a cost code that it's going against. Sage 50, I think they're called phases, and I think you get I think it's 2 levels. Yep. Sage gives you up to 4 levels with a cost code. So the cost code has 3 levels in it, and then you got the job number. So you basically have 4 levels that you can track. It just combines it into one field called cost code, but that little dash right there is basically different segments of the cost code that you can use to to separate things out. And so that would be an example if I was to take this AP invoice and post it through, then for this job and that cost code and for that labor type within that cost code, then I'd see $150 hit. I forgot to add my total. Okay, so I post that and it would show up on my job. So over time, you start to accumulate different buckets of information. Each of these are basically showing the different cost codes that you have. And then for a given period and time frame, what are the amounts, that are basically going through each of those different cost codes. I didn't mention different cost types as well. So within the cost code, then you've got, material and labor, and there's about 5 or 6 out of the box cost types, and you can create more if you want. So if you're doing like an R&D type thing, then you could take, AP stuff and send it through the job. You can also come through, and when you do inventory, then you could take inventory type transactions, and you can issue something to a job. You can see I specify different things right there. I'd say, well, here's my item code. Heck, we've got our events. Why don't we just use events? Yeah. So then I can apply my events into a specific cost code on that job. So I can apply one of those in. Some of these GL accounts we have set up. Yeah. For where I want them to hit. But for now, I'm just going to pick whatever GL accounts. So so then as soon as I was to take this issue right there and then go through the posting process, then it's going to take that right there and it's going to apply that item. Basically, it takes it out of inventory. So that item will disappear out of inventory, but the cost for it is then going to be applied into the job under whatever cost code and cost type right there, the labor that I specified. So then I would come through over to my job again, and if I was to look at my, let's see, oh, maybe I don't have any, so I haven't hit that yet with the 700-02, but as soon as I post it through, then I would see that on my 700-02 cost code, then I'm going to see my, wherever the field is, your period to date and year to date costs would all of a sudden jump up to 206,000, for that item that is then being applied into that job. So it takes it out of inventory and then just applies it into the job that you've got set up over there.
Okay, that's helpful.
So basically what you find is that with Sage 50, Sage 100 does, there's a reason that a lot of companies make the transition from Sage 50 to Sage 100, and it's because it feels logical. Like we do this all the time. I probably, half my projects that I do at least our Sage 50 customers moving up to Sage 100, because you get a lot of new features, but you don't feel like you're like relearning, like you're not reinventing the wheel either. So it's
right.
You know, all the stuff that Sage does, you can customize, you can add new fields into it. You can customize all the forms, you know, that print out to your heart's content.
Yep.
You know, and you can track jobs, but you can track it in more detail than you can in Sage 50. And you can do, you know, sales orders and POs and all that kind of stuff. But you just do everything. It's just more automated. It's just a more comprehensive system that ties it all together and gives you the flexibility to change quite a bit of how it functions in order to get the job done that you need.
Right. Yeah, I'm getting that feeling. Like it's not much different from Sage 50, but the functionality appears to give you a more detailed view of what's going on.
Yeah. And then, so one other thing, so I'm going through just posting all that, but then if you come to the back end, this is posting the GL stuff, it's posting over to the job. So that's why I'm clicking on each of these screens. Yeah, there's my GL posting. It's not coming out of inventory and then hitting that GL account I specified. Yeah. So now, actually, if we come over to our job and take a peek, there's my 702. There's my cost amount. It's then come through, you know, showing up in period 6. You can see that has now dumped over into there. So if we're talking back end, you know, we talked about, do you want to do the non-SQL version or the SQL version? But I come through here and is VM bill header. I scroll down. Here's our events, our two revisions. So there's the 000 and the 001 events. So all this stuff, you know, from this standpoint, you've got all of your transactional or all of your master table information. So I can see right here, here's all the item codes that go on the events. But then as we start going through like and looking at transactional information, then if you know SQL, then you can just start flying through and creating all sorts of junk with really fast reporting and very, you know, customized reporting. So you can create, you know, Crystal reports will ship with Sage 100, but then you can take reports and add them, basically import them in as like a custom, as custom reports right here on your menu. So the end user, if they don't know as a custom report, they may never know, because you know they just look and feel like they're part of the system. And I don't know exactly, you know, how much you've worked with SQL, but you can create custom views within SQL and then have the reports, you know, on the front end of Sage 100 look at custom views. You can do some stored procedures in here. You can, you know, if you're talking like commissions, calculations, all that kind of stuff, you can utilize all the power of SQL and then use the custom fields and custom tables within Sage 100 to really do some pretty cool stuff. You know, some pretty I don't know, fancy sounds kind of dorky. That's my inner IT nerd is coming out when I say, you know, I talk about this kind of stuff. But it's you certainly get a lot of just functionality. You know, if I wanted to look at all of my costs or all of my inventory on hand. Well, this item doesn't actually. Oh, you guys aren't serial costing, so it's not going to be in there. Be in a different table. But look at customers. All of your customer information is there, and and you can maintain as many databases as you want, you know, with the system. So when you buy the software, it just includes as many customer or company codes, excuse me, as you want to set up. Do you use payroll?
We outsource it to ADP.
Is it okay? Yeah, bank reconciliation. I'm just kind of scanning through here. Visual Integrator. This is an import tool. that basically allows you to import stuff into the system. So if you had like a bill of material, for example,
Yes.
that you wanted to import in, you know, from another system where
Right.
you're kind of building everything, then
Yep.
I'm not actually going to finish it, but I'll just show you the start. So you'd import it
Yep.
in, you point at it, you know, as Excel file, CSV. I think you can do ODBC data source. So if it's another SQL database you wanted to point it at, you could do that.
Okay.
And then you're basically saying, what's the bill number? What's the revision number? What kind of bill is it? What are the components that belong to it? And then you either run this manually. So like if somebody knows that they want to run it, then, you know, then they can just come in and you can give them permissions to run it. Or you can set it up on a schedule and say, well, nightly it's going to just run through and pull new imports into there. And then you can add those jobs on, you can add those jobs onto your menu and say, okay, well, if I want to run it manually, I've now added it to my menu and say, well, I'm going to import vendor prices, or I'm going to import bill of material. And so the end user doesn't have to look at any of what I just showed you. They're just going to see one screen that says, okay, show me the file that you want to import, and then I'm going to go and import it.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we would definitely have to be importing the bombs because they can get pretty lengthy. I'm just like the bombs. Hey, it's got 20 assemblies on it. Each of those assemblies has to be created as an inventory item, right?
You said each of the bombs has to be created as an inventory item?
No, so like the bomb will have, say, 20 assemblies on it, right? And the assemblies have, say, there's 4 parts each. Each one of those assemblies has to be created as an inventory item, and then you have to build them to complete it. Is that right? Unless,
yeah, I mean,
okay. It seems like there's definitely workarounds. That's why this is like very it's very complex, because like I feel like I need to spend a week in there with my data to figure out how it would work best, if that makes sense.
No, it totally does. I think what we normally do, just so that you know, is when we go through the implementation process, we kind of do 2 stages, if you will. The first one is we go through all the setups. You know, we have GoToMeeting calls like this, where we just share the screen and say, okay, here's all the settings in AR, here's all the settings in AP, here's all the settings in bill of materials, and we kind of talk through them all, and then get you, you know, what we think is the right setup. Then we do a test migration of your data, and that's what we train with. So when we go, you know, when we proceed to the training stage, then we'll use all that test data and say, okay, here's all the stuff to what we think is right, the right way of running with this. And then we do all the training using that. Usually you're going to identify a few things that you're going to tweak. You know, after you're actually in it, using it and stuff, you're like, oh, you know what? I think I actually want to do it this other way. So we make those changes in the settings and everything before go live. Like typically after training, you know, several weeks after that we go live. And so we've got time to make modifications to stuff or build it out or whatever. And so a lot of those things that you're talking about, like, don't stress too much about them, just in the sense that that's part of the implementation process, is kind of tweaking and making sure that you've got time to just play with it, with some kind of guided training and with your own information, so that you can kind of look at it and make sense of it before you actually jump in with both feet.
Okay, makes sense.
There's a paperless office. So this module right here is really interesting. It allows you to basically set up documents for emailing. And so, for example, you can have a vendor for example, where you say, every time I send a PO, I just want to email the PO to the vendor. Or on the sales order side, rather than printing off an invoice for a customer and then going to the fax machine, then you can set up emailing and have it go to 6 different people at their company or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it keeps a record of what's been emailed. You can double click on any of those records. It brings up a PDF that was sent, to the customer. And so it's, sales orders, AR statements, purchase orders, check advices, pretty much any of your logical things that you may want to send to a customer. Generally, you've got the ability in here to do that.
Okay.
And so
let me ask you something.
Yeah.
So, is there a way to connect jobs to the sales orders?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mention that. So if you've got a sales order right there, then you can tie it into a specific job. And then when you do that, so the only thing you got to be careful of is we go through this during the setup, but if just in case you had some stuff we applied it in through AP, you're also getting cost potentially applied from the sales order item, that's being shipped out. And so if you want that cost to be reflected over in the cost code, for that specific item over on that job, there's some settings you got to think about, like, where do you want the information coming from so you don't double cost things on the job side. So you're not doubling up what you're seeing reflected over there. But the short version is, that's basically your link. Or if you wanted to kind of create one on the fly, then there's a setting where you can say, hey, every time I, type in a new number, it's going to prompt me if it's a new one and allow you potentially to create a new job. And so if I was to say that and then hit accept, as soon as I hit accept, now it actually went over and created that new job on the fly, which is another setting. You can turn that off and make it so that you have to manually come over here and set up a job. It just cares about how much control you want over the setup process. Security settings within Sage 100 are a lot more granular than they are in Sage 50. And so if I pull up like a given role, and make this bigger because there's a crap load. So within every module, then you got all the different tasks, and then can I create, modify, remove, review records in there. And so it's across all the different modules. And then you've got security events, which control additional kind of special features, exporting, importing, posting of stuff. You've got module options for each of these things that are, allow credit limit override. Do I allow commission override? Do I allow on-the-fly customer creation? All sorts of, there's like thousands of different checkboxes in here. It's kind of a pain sometimes.
Yeah. We definitely need that.
And so you've got all those different, settings that you can then use and apply to different people in different companies. So, so a lot of, like I said, it's just like, it's like Sage 50, except it just does all the same stuff plus a lot more stuff that that you can tie into it. Brian, anything that I'm not mentioning that you think I should point out?
I don't think so.
I feel like we're getting, good coverage on the important things, but just kind of scanning through, see if there's anything else that we want to talk about. Purchase orders. Go ahead.
What if I just suggest something? So, would it be possible if, over the next week, I prepare a file that has a sales order that I envision for one of our current jobs, and I can also give you a cleaned up BOM, and I'll probably like do half of whatever it really is. And then I could give you, obviously the BOM will have the inventory items, and then you can like put that into a test company so that I can see it, and how things are moving almost real time. Would that work for you guys?
Yeah, I think we can do that. So the thing that we have to be careful about is that, you know, sometimes you'll get customers that say, well, can you set up this? Can you set up that? And it's like you're 14 hours in, you know, of importing stuff in and setting stuff in. So I want to make sure, I think it's important to make sure that you feel comfortable with, you know, that it's going to solve your problems, right? So I totally get that. And so I would just say, yeah, just send over something. And as long as we're not talking, you know, hours and hours of time, you know, to set up, you know, 1,000 different parts or whatever, just, I would maybe even simplify the example and just say, look, here's the master item we're doing. It's going to have 3 of these component items. Each of these component items has a bill of material that has 2 other items to it, or something like that. And we can set up, you know, 10 items or whatever in the system and set up a few BOMs to mirror it and everything, and then just go through the actual build process of, you know, of assembling that, putting it on the sales order, shipping the sales order out, just to make sure that, yeah, you feel comfortable with the flow of, you know, of where everything's going. So yeah, I definitely don't mind doing it as long as it's not something exorbitant.
Well, I mean, if I know that Sage 100 is going to work for us, I mean, Sage 50 could possibly work for us if we wanted to. I know that Sage 100 has more functionality. It'll be better for the job costing. Why don't we? I mean, I'm fine with committing to it. I just need to start now understanding cost, right? So like today, you're walking me through Sage 100 out of the box, right? So let's move forward and then talk about the cost behind implementation for this.
Yeah, no, we can certainly do that. So I've prepped a bunch of questions to be, so before we jump in, it's probably half hour's worth of questions, give or take. So I just want to make sure that you're good for time before we start, you know, walking through all that stuff. So is another 30 minutes work for you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So let me get my notes ready. Okay, so first question is, and all these things, some of them may not make sense, but they all go into helping us figure out what's the scope of the project, right?
Okay.
And we'll probably actually have you share your screen in Sage 50 and, you know, your other inventory system, I forget what it's called. But we'll have you probably share your screen so we can view some of those, you know, some of that information. But to start, how many companies are you planning on bringing into Sage 100? Is it just one Sage 50 database, or do you have multiple companies?
It'll be 2.
Okay, and are there differences? Are they pretty much the same type of business, or is like one a holding company and, you know, one's runs the full gamut? Like, what is the difference between the 2?
Yeah, obviously the more in-depth company that actually uses the job costing is the one we just talked about, just PMI Kyoto, and then we have another company which we call called Kai Legacy, and it's basically just sales of parts and an export business, but it's much more simple than what we're doing.
Okay. Are the list of like part numbers, for example, between the 2 systems the same, or do they each have their own part numbers?
They're different.
Okay. You said that Kai does not use job costs.
No.
Is the setup, so one of the things that kind of factors into cost is can we copy setups from one company to another? And so there's a couple things that are involved with that. Like number one, can we assume that all the module settings will be the same across companies? And then the secondary thing to that is, are the chart of accounts the same or are they different?
Yep, everything will be the same.
Okay, so chart of accounts is identical. That way, we can just copy the same chart into both companies rather than having to build, each one separately.
Right.
So chart is identical, and then what was the other thing I just asked? The setups. Can we assume that the setups will be the same?
Yeah, they can use the same modules. That's fine.
Okay. So next question is, these questions are going to be just kind of based off of trying to figure out what is, how much information exactly are we bringing across? If we're bringing across 100 GL accounts and their history, as opposed to 50,000 GL accounts, there's a difference in scale there, right?
Right.
So let's actually, I'm going to give you control, because then we can just view your screen as you're going into Sage 50 on these. So let's see. Okay, so you should be able to share the screen now.
Okay, that one. Okay.
All right. So within the GL, and these numbers, they just need to be ballpark. I'm looking for like hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands is kind of the range. So in the GL, how many? Let's say 400 GL accounts. Okay. And how much history do you want brought across? Like most companies will bring at least a year or two, so they've got comparative financials. You don't have to. You can just bring over beginning, just balances as of, September 1st or October 1st or whatever. But do you want to bring across history?
So here's the thing, because in Sage 50 right now, we don't do purchase orders or the sales orders functioning, right? That all happens in another system. So the way I've rolled over companies is I've just taken the balances for each of the GLs and then imported everything that was outstanding, whether it be AR or AP. So look, history-wise, it's okay if we we don't need to bring over the history, because we're very familiar with sort of pulling data from two sources to get to our full comprehensive periods at this point.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll just bring across just basically open current, I should say, GL balances as of the migration date.
Yeah.
Okay. So no history over current GL balances. And so what that'll mean is that, if you run a P&L in Sage 100 for May of this year, for example, you're not going to see anything. It's only going to be as of that start date that we actually see any activity starting to happen in Sage.
But you'd get the balance, right? You could put the balance in there. You just wouldn't have detail behind it. Well, right? Like I can give you.
Yeah. Are you saying that you want, month-end balances for prior months?
Yeah. So
we can do it. I'm just making sure I'm understanding what you're wanting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. Okay. Yeah. So import the GL. No detail for any of the historical months, but I'd like to give you the monthly balance, so that if I ran a P&L for the entire year, I'd still get to my year-to-date number, annual period. I just don't need to drill down into any of the detail. I'll go find that somewhere else.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're just saying you want, so it really is, you do want some history, but it's just current year and basically period end amounts. It may actually, I'll have to see what the reports are for Sage 50, because I know that there's a detail one. I can't remember if there's a good one for importing month-end balances. I guess we could kind of back in from like the trial balance into there. But so we do want a little bit of history, but it's just basically current year in any case, whether it's detailed or summarized. We just need current year GL balances. So that way, at least for the current year, you can run a P&L and see by month what actually happened at a summary level.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. In terms of financial statements, do you guys do any consolidated reporting between the two entities? Do they function as basically two separate entities?
Yeah, right now we do operate separately. The consolidation is relatively simple. It's really just like a combination, and then we eliminate the intercompany accounts.
Okay. So simple multi-company reporting. And then with your financial reports, Sage 50, it's got some reports in there. They're not super fancy, but they get the job done. On your financial reporting side, so Sage has, we didn't talk about that today, but there's a couple financial reporting tools. One is more like Sage 50, where it's just kind of drag and drop, wizard driven, and you get about 30 or 40 different options for it, and you click go, and you got a financial statement that kind of uses a preset format for it. There's also Sage Intelligence, which allows you to really customize your reports in a lot of detail and reorder where accounts go and add and subtract accounts from each other, and trends. It all flows into Excel, so you can use all of your Excel knowledge and build financial statements in there. Do you see yourselves using the out of the box kind of wizard driven financials, or do you want more control and want to have like more complex, shall we say, financials?
So the way our GL is set up right now is that the COGS accounts are codified to identify a department. So right now we use pretty much the standard reporting plus a couple other ones that show COGS by department.
Okay.
But nothing more than that. And then we'd want to see how easy it is to generate job profitability reports.
Okay. And by job, are you talking about sales orders, or are you talking about jobs?
Yeah. So 80% of the businesses would be sales orders, and they basically represent a full job.
Right. So when you talk about job profitability, it's really kind of a sales order report that we're talking about.
Right.
Okay. So job profitability report. Okay, so back to the GL stuff. I think what we'll do then is we'll plan on spending some time just to review. I think it's good to talk about and train on financial statements. And the Sage Intelligence module, it does a lot more than the standard one does. And for your multi-company financials, for example, it can automate that. If we get I think Brian, we need the connector module, the Sage Intelligence connector module to do that. But then it allows you just to click a button basically and run your financials and get both companies rolled up and totaled, and you can do your eliminations and all that kind of stuff. Just click of a button. And so I would suggest that, especially as you grow, you'll probably build those out because I think you'll find them useful. Those financial statements, and for the most part, that there's the additional module, but all the rest of it comes with a package anyway. Like you're going to get Sage Intelligence whether you like it or not, so you may as well use it.
Okay.
Okay. Do you guys have budgets that you maintain in Sage 50?
No, we do not. We just this year we started building out a budget per job. So we will end up putting those into Sage 100 We just don't do that now.
Okay. So moving on then to accounts payable, we're basically going to go through each of the modules, in kind of this form or fashion. So roughly speaking, how many vendors do you have in, in PMI? Okay, so 1,400.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know off the top of your head? I mean, so we've got was it Kai? You said is going to be less than that. Or do you have them both open right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could open them if you want me to open up the other one.
Just do it. We're seeing all the stuff in there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like 200 or something like that.
Okay, and as long as, heck, I probably didn't need to make you go over there. As long as it's just, in the hundreds.
I mean, I know them off the top of my head, so.
Right.
It's probably like
how
200,
many?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, we'll just.
Okay.
If we know that's the smaller one, then as long as we know the upper range of what we're dealing with, then. With the number of invoices that you're dealing with on an AP side, and that they could be coming through purchase order, they may be coming just directly into AP, but roughly speaking, are you dealing with, like, let's say dozens of invoices a week, hundreds of invoices a week, or thousands of invoices a week?
Definitely hundreds.
Hundreds of invoices per week.
Yeah, I mean, maybe 200.
So your aging is probably going to have several hundred items on the aging report, right?
Yes.
In your AP aging.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you guys do any type of ACH processing, or do you printing checks for everything? How do you pay your vendors?
Yep, ACH. Some ACH, some checks.
Okay. And then how do you process your ACHs? Are you going like onto your bank website and putting the information in there, or are you generating an actual like notcha file that you're sending to the bank?
Yeah, it's there's treasury software, and then it gets uploaded to the bank.
Okay, so you're actually getting the notcha file. Okay, and Sage 100 has the ACH stuff just built right in, and so I don't know if I haven't heard of Treasury. I'm assuming it's not U.S. Treasury. It's just like that. It's called Treasury software. Is just the name of the software.
Yep.
Okay, so that'll basically be replaced by Sage 100 because it's just got ACH stuff in there. So we'll just have to configure the ACH module.
Okay.
And how many bank accounts does each company have? Is it basically one operating bank account, or do you use more accounts than that?
Yeah, I think there's going to end up being a total of 6. Each of us, I think, use
PMI.
3. An operating, a money market, which we transfer between, and then Kai does the same, but then Kai holds a little bit of money in an additional bank which pays is used by headquarters for like Japanese related transactions.
Okay. And you guys said that you do so it's all US dollar, everything's settling in US dollars. Any desire to do like intercompany GL entries? It's not out of the box, but there's an add-on that Sage has that allows you to do intercompany transactions. Any interest, or is it low enough volume you don't care?
I think I'd have to see it.
Make a note of it, and I can send you a link, so you can kind of see what's included in it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not significant volume, but I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so yeah, two or three banks per company, and one main operating account, money market. So basically, you got one account in each company that's handling the bulk of stuff. It sounds like.
Yes.
All right. So same questions on the AR side. Roughly how many customers, how many invoices per week, et cetera. They're going on your aging.
Yeah, let me just. So 500.
Okay, and then Kai will be less than that.
Yeah, I think Kai's got no more than 20.
Okay, and most of your invoices are probably coming from, well, actually you're going to have some coming because for the deposits that you're collecting, you're going to have some invoices happening up at the AR level too. But if you look at your aging report, roughly how many invoices do you have sitting on your AR aging?
It's a few hundred, a couple hundred. Let me just run one. Yeah, because we have sales orders for spare parts on there too. So. Yeah, it's a couple hundred.
All right. Okay. With the, what was I going to ask? Oh yeah, with payments that you're taking from customers, you do any credit card processing, or is it mainly just check and wire, type payments that you're taking in from customers?
Yeah, check and wire. Very little credit card.
Only reason I ask is there's an additional module, like there's a credit card processing module that's fully integrated with Sage 100. I mean, it's actually just one of the out-of-the-box modules, but then you have to, you can get set up with Sage to use the Sage merchant and all that kind of stuff. It will charge everything and help deposit into your account. But if you're doing low volume, then, your call on if it's of any interest. But most companies they get are doing high volume credit cards. So,
it's very low.
Yeah. Okay. And then inventory. So I was scanning through the notes that Brian sent over. It sounds like in PMI you've got, was it like 15,000 or something parts?
Yeah, you can't look at this. I cleaned around 16,000 items a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. And then on the Kai side, it's fewer than that, I assume.
It's a couple hundred.
Yeah, a lot smaller on Kai side.
Yep.
Okay, in terms of the complexity of what we should bring across. So you got items, but then you've also got relationships between like what vendors do you have set up to be linked to those items, so that you can like save cost information for those vendors. Likewise with prices that you got to your customers. Do you guys maintain anything other than a base cost and a base price for your inventory items?
No, it's just average costs or last cost purchase, and it'll only be really one level of pricing, possibly two.
Okay, and for the possible two, what is the structure of that?
Well, it is possible that who we sell to, if they've been a customer a long time, we might give them a little better pricing. So it's really would end up being like a manual sort of situation as we go through the items.
Okay. So when we talked about inventory in Sage 100, we talked about like alias part numbers. So, like an item number that's different to your customer, different to your vendor than it is to you for the same item. Any of that that you want to bring in, or not to start?
I don't think we need to. we will put the inventory item numbers that we will use is essentially the numbers supplied to us by the vendor.
Okay. So it sounds like your inventory setup itself is really basic. Is that a fair statement?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we don't need to worry about, like, if you're just using last costs, then do we need to bring in like associated vendors for an item? Like, I guess in stage 50, when you set up an item, do you set up a default vendor for it to come from?
So our inventory management is coming from a different system.
Right.
We use inflow for that. And it does track purchases by the different vendors if you are buying from different vendors for same items. However, I think 80% of our items are always bought from the same vendor. So there's not a lot of overlap with the parts.
Yeah, I was going to say where you guys are doing custom builds and stuff, you probably got your specific vendors that stuff is typically coming from. So, right. Okay. So that's, we'll just do that as part of the inventory setup. Like not worry about custom costs that we bring across for them, but just say, hey, here's this item. Here's the default vendor for the item if it has one.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, so bring over quantities on hand and current costs for those items. Cool. Yes, that all makes sense. Anything else before I move on from inventory? Is there anything that I'm missing with regards to inventory? I guess we'll talk about bill of materials in just a second, but like I said before, it really sounds like your inventory is pretty cut and dry. It's like a lot of quantity, but not much complexity.
Yeah, it's really straightforward. So essentially what we've covered so far is commercial parts. We will have part of our inventory is PMI specifically made parts coming out of our shop. We make those as part of the machine, and then if we have additional stock, they get put into the inventory, or if we know we need a high volume sort of production of a lot that we will make for maybe 4 machines throughout the year, we do have those sort of parts, but it's not complex. I mean, they just have a PMI part number. And that's really that.
Okay. So bill of materials, do you guys want to start off importing in a bunch of bill of materials that you already have? Or is it going to be more of like a going forward type thing where it's like as you put new sales orders in the system for new configurations of a part that you are basically just kind of creating those as you go? Or do you have a library of bombs you want to bring in?
Yeah, it's going to be going forward because at this point in time, while we could do that, I mean, I really need the engineer teams to go through the bombs and sort of make sure they're accurate and correct.
Okay.
And I don't want to have them spend time going backwards. I need them really doing it correct going forward so that they use their time appropriately.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. Same thing we had this other company do because they, yeah, like I said, because the old stuff, if it doesn't need to go on a sales order, then the new version of it that they make may not be the same as the old one anyway. So they're just like, yeah, let's just leave it blank and we'll just create them as we go.
Makes sense.
Okay. So it'd mainly be more training on how to use bill of materials and doing some test, versions of it. Okay, is what we'll really focus on. All right. So sales orders. How many orders are you putting in like per day? And I know you said that the manufacturing process on these can be quite long. So how many orders do you have in inflow or wherever you're kind of tracking it? How many orders do you generally have kind of in process at any given point in time?
Yeah, so the machine side, I would say we're probably doing 25 to 30 machine orders a year, and then on spare parts and service, any given day, we're probably doing, I think it's probably 5 to 7 a day.
Okay. And that's all on the PMI side, right?
Yes.
Okay. So 25 to 30 machine orders, and then per year, and then 5 to 7 parts or service orders per day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Speaking of spare parts and service, do you track warranties on your items?
Yeah, so the machines have a 1-year warranty, and that covers parts and service. Well, we track it offline, but we would like to be able to incorporate that information into the accounting system.
Okay. So yeah, after sales order, we'll talk about RMA and if it's a fit for you guys to use it or not.
Okay.
Which is return merchandise authorization, basically taking stuff that's sold out and bringing it back in potentially for replacement or repair.
Okay.
Okay. So sales orders. With those sales orders, do you want us to import those in, or do you guys want to key those in when we go live? Like, I guess what's the volume of? Is it if it's 30 orders? I guess you're going to have probably what, couple hundred orders in process at any given point in time. Or is it less than that?
Yeah. I think it's at any given point in time, it's probably 50 to 70. I have somebody that their focus is sales orders, so she will be entering those in.
Okay. Because yeah, we can import them in, but yeah, if it's a lower quantity, it takes a lot of time sometimes to import all those in and get them all tested and everything for the import. So you'll save a little bit of time just by keying them in if it's a lower quantity like that. So,
well,
and then
let me ask you something. So, sorry. If we set like a go live date, you're talking about when you say like import, are you talking about all the historical ones or importing as you move forward?
As you move forward. So just basically, like I said, we do the same thing with AP and AR. We don't bring across history. I tell people it's like buying a new car. It's like you can't necessarily take the wheels off the old car and have them work on the new car quite right. So it's possible to bring across history for some stuff, but there are challenges and some limitations to it. And it costs quite a bit sometimes to do it. But yeah, so sales orders and purchase orders, we just bring them across like what's currently active, what hasn't shipped yet, basically.
Oh yeah, perfect. We can manually do that.
Okay. So we basically just make sure inventory quantities are in there correctly. And then you'll just go in, you guys can key in the sales orders. Okay. And then what about Kai? Is it less than that, I assume?
Yeah, a lot less. Machine orders per year, it's probably around 5, maybe 3 to 5, and then sales orders might be only like 2 to 3 a month, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a lot less flowing through there. All right. Purchase orders. How many POs do we need to worry about bringing across? Probably it doesn't sound like you do that much ordering. It's all once a week or whatever.
Purchase orders? Yeah, we do a lot of purchase orders. They're at any given time. There's probably 50 to 75 open ones.
Okay, and so same question there. Do you guys want to be responsible for keying those in the new system, or do you want us to set up imports for bringing those across?
I mean, we can manually do it, but like, will we ever have the ability to import data on our own?
Yeah, I know. It's
Oh, okay.
You guys can import stuff in. You know, that just comes, that module that I showed you just comes with the package.
Yep.
But
Okay.
some of this stuff, it's like you'll do it once, and then
Mm-hmm.
you'll probably never run some of these import jobs again. And so
Right.
those are the ones that people typically hand off to us and say, you guys just take care of it, get it up and running, and then you'll have specific ones that actually help, you know, going forward. So, yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, we can manually enter any of the open purchase orders, or I mean, I could work through the import. I mean, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and the reason that I say that, so the imports can just be finicky. You know, it's like if you've got, you know, part numbers that are, you know, have been modified or quantities aren't on hand, you just get the import modules, like once it's set up and running, it works great.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of nuances and a lot of checking of the data that it does. And if you get like one little thing wrong, you'll spend an hour, you know, just kind of combing through trying to figure out what you missed on it. And so it's like for 50 orders, you know, I kind of sit there, I'm like, is it worth even setting it up? Because you can spend 4 hours working on setting up the job. And if it only takes 4 hours to key it all in, then you may as well just, you know, save the money and then just key them in. Okay, so Kai, how many in Kai you think?
Purchase orders open. It's the same. There's probably five of them open at any month end.
Okay. I assume, I didn't ask this before, but like we asked about the GL, was it the same? But with the forms, so like the sales order forms, the purchase order forms, the invoice forms, can we assume that they're identical between the two companies other than maybe like a logo change?
It'll be the same logo. Yeah, they'll be the same.
Oh, both companies have the same logo?
So legally, it's the same company. We just operate on subledgers for just the easiness of it.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So GL, AP, AR. We already talked about banks. Inventory, sales order, purchase order. Oh, RMA. So there's an RMA module within Sage 100, and it corresponds with sales orders. So if you think about, you know, you got a sales order, you ship something to somebody, and let's say it breaks 6 months in. So you guys, you know, they may ship it back, and you can do this stuff offline. Like there's not a right or wrong answer here. It's just a matter of preference. But the RMA module allows you to basically issue like a receipt entry and actually print off an RMA number that you can send to the customer and say, hey, this is return 12345. So that when it comes in your door, you know, if they've included that slip of paper, or if they've identified the shipment with that, then you can correspond it with something right there in your system. And then it allows you to basically receive that item back in to inventory. You can send a replacement item back out to them. Now, if you're dealing with widgets, sometimes it's more appropriate for widgets where you're dealing with everything that's identical. Like your replacement item is just another widget sitting on a shelf that you're sending to them. You guys are dealing specifically with, you know, I'm assuming custom machined parts that are coming back in. And so is it better for you guys just to keep it off the books and say, hey, we're going to fix it, we're going to cost it somewhere, maybe you put it into a job cost entry or whatever, just to track some of your costs on it, make sure it's captured somewhere. But do you really want to worry about?
Yeah, I don't think the RMA would work well for us.
Okay. And I can't remember if it comes with the distribution bundle that you guys will get or not. But so you may end up with it in either case, but we just won't worry about setting it up.
Okay.
All right. So then we're getting towards the end. So Good job being patient.
It's okay.
Colby, Vince, I've got a 5:30 I got to jump on, so I'm gonna need to jump off.
Okay. Yeah.
So Vince, both of you guys, I'll circle back to you. Not this evening. Well, Vince, for you tomorrow. Okay.
Okay, sounds good, Brian.
All right. Thanks.
All right, see you, Brian. With regards to training, so generally what we'll do with a project like this is generally it's a week's worth of training, and we can. Some companies say, we want to do way less than that. Some say we want to do more than that. And then we've also got COVID, now, which is makes this more interesting, because generally we prefer to come on site, because that way people aren't checking Facebook, while we're doing training. It's like you get several people in a room and get a couple laptops brought in or whatever, and then train, and it's like it's more effective. But all that being said, do you guys have a preference for how you'd prefer to train? Do you want it to be done online? Do you want me there on site? What is your guys' preference?
How do you feel the online trainings go so far?
We do, I'd say probably about 80% of our trainings, pre-COVID, 80% was done in person, just because like I said, it's more effective in general, because there's like that little element of not wanting to check Facebook when the person's right there, and I'm really fine either way. I talked with my wife about it, because we're, everybody's making all these personal decisions with all the people they've got in their lives and all that. So I totally get it. And if you guys prefer, web training, my feelings are not hurt at all. Like, we're really just, if I came there, I don't know what crowd you're in, but I'm just like, it doesn't hurt me to wear a mask. And if it makes other people feel safe, then maybe there's benefit to them, maybe there's benefit to me. So if I came, I'd be wearing a mask in any case.
Right.
But also, it's one more person added into the mix. And so I'm really good either way. Like I said, we'll just work with you guys on whichever version of training you prefer. And if we want to do it online, we would just do a go-to meeting just like this. And then that kind of also becomes a question of maybe we get 2 or 3 people, from your company that become like the trainees, and we record the video maybe, and then they train the trainers, or excuse me, like I train the trainers, and then your 2 or 3 people would then be the ones that bring the rest of the people on board with how to use it. 15 people online, I think it'd be worthless, but if you get 2 or 3, I think it's workable.
Right. So, like, I think I mentioned this before, our company, it runs rather lean, right? So I have one person who processes sales orders for spare parts. I have one person that enters sales orders for service. And then I have one person doing purchasing, and one person doing AR, one person doing AP. But how we could actually do this is you could train me, and then I could easily just walk through with each of them their specific function. I think that would work really well.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. If you've got it, if it's split up in that form, then you could also do like, just a thought to save yourself some time, is if like one day if we do AP, then we bring in the AP person and you. And then when we do AR, we bring in an AP or the AR person and you. So that way, it works best, especially for a company, your size. It works best to have one person at the company kind of know the software really well and become kind of like the internal resource, if you will. So yeah, we can figure it out. We don't have to have the details on that, but so it sounds like we'll do web training
we can do that.
Is the preference. And then, and then we'll just, we'll make it work. It works as long as people are paying attention. And if there's a couple people, I feel like it's reasonable that we can make it go that way. If you got, like I said, if you get 5 or 10 people, it becomes a lot more challenging on the web to do it. So
no, that makes sense. And I'll be in the training with them. So it'll be really focused.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Okay.
Okay, so then with training, then go live date. What I know we talked about like September 1, October 1. What's your preferred date that you'd like to go live?
I mean, if we could target October 1st, that would be awesome.
Okay. So yeah, so that'd give us sufficient time. Probably a little extra, where these companies have the similarities that they do. We could. I mean, let's see. We wanted to target September 1. I like to do over month end. It seems to be cleanest, to do it that way. But would you want, if September 1st was possible, would you want to go for it, or do you prefer October 1st?
I would prefer to end the quarter and start live on a fresh quarter. And I just want the buffer zone, because at the end of the day, first week of every month puts me out of commission, and also rolling into the new role, I'm going to have to dedicate a little more time just to admin sort of tasks for that second week of the month.
Okay. Okay, training, go live. The other thing is we generally allot some time in every implementation. A good portion of it we do fixed fee, because after looking at your data and just getting a feel for the scope and volume of stuff, it allows us to just say, look, for X, Y, and Z, here's the price we're going to charge. There's typically a couple pieces that we break out from that, and so one of those is the custom reports, or adding custom fields. And there's a lot of things we talked about that the software can do. And if you want to, if there's a report and you get using the system and you're like, you know what, this report gets me 70% there, but we're going to need to do some additional work to get to 30%. So we usually allot, a number of hours into each implementation, just as kind of I don't want to call it a slush bucket, but it becomes a little bit of that. Just like any custom requests, any custom reports, any custom fields that we're helping you with, we just got a budget for those. If you were to put your guys' company kind of on a scale of 0 to 10, are you the type of company that wants to customize everything, get the report really dialed in, or are you at 0, which is I just use what the system gives me? Where would you put yourself on that scale?
I mean, we probably fall anywhere between the 4 to 6 range.
Okay, so just kind of somewhere
depending
in the middle.
on, yeah.
Okay. So what I'll do, in these hours, they're not billed unless they're incurred. So basically, I'm putting them in there as, essentially as a bucket that can be used, and if you don't use it, you're not out anything. That way, we just try and go in with accurate expectations. So I'm going to put in we'll do 12 hours, and that just gives us that's basically enough time to do a couple, 2 or 3 reports or whatever. And if we don't use it, great. And if you do, then you've got some time budgeted, just right there, for it. So that could be setting up custom imports, for example, for your bill of materials, bringing those in from another system, all those types of things. Are there any other integrations that you currently have or that you want to have between your accounting system and some other system? I know there's bill of material. Are there any others?
So we currently have SQL running job cost system right now. And essentially what I do is I'll run a couple queries, and I'll pull out the production and assembly hours by department, and I'll cut it up by job. And then once it's all clean, I just basically I create a cost allocation rate on a monthly basis, and then essentially just recreate that cost and manually put it into the accounting system, right? I don't know, I feel like at this current point, the SQL data still needs to be cleaned on a monthly basis. So I I don't want it going straight from the shop to the accounting system without me looking at it. But I think in the future, it would be cost efficient or even time efficient if we could send it directly.
Yeah, no, it's and we can certainly look at doing things like that. So is that kind of like a phase 2 then to go ahead and bring that in, or?
Yeah, I think that could be like a phase 2.
I guess should we include it? Should we include that in like our custom hours? Like, should we increase our bucket of hours, or?
How many hours did you say are in it right now?
I said 12, which is enough to get, probably generally speaking, 2 or 3 things done. That's a very like dartboard, like I'm just hucking a dart across the room type thing. But it's enough to get usually 2 or 3 reports or a few imports done, or something like that. It's not going to get you tons done, but it won't leave you dry either.
Well, okay. What's the charge per hour? I just give you a number.
Company rate, it's $195 an hour.
Okay. So what? I mean, why don't you throw like 40 hours on there
for customized stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. So say BOM import, job cost import. Okay, so we'll just have, there's a lot, like I said, there's a lot you can do in Sage 100, and some of it takes, just got to configure it how you want it, and then it'll sing for you, but you got to get the stuff in there right. So that actually, I forgot to mention job cost. So I assumed you want the job cost module, number 1. And then number 2, do you want to set it up, I assume, kind of with a similar to what I showed you today in terms of how we set it up and everything?
How you set it up. I guess I'm a little, so like if you have if you have the actual module, I guess explain that to me. What do you mean, like how it's actually set up? So that maybe that wasn't very clear, but so I gave you a couple examples, where you said, okay, we may have some jobs where you're booking directly to it from accounts payable or from inventory, and you're just popping stuff right into it. You're going to have other jobs that may be tied to a specific sales order, or to maybe 10 sales orders where you're booking all those sales orders to the same job, so you can see it accumulate, buckets of cost information for those. So if you were building a home, for example, then you're using a job cost system, and you could say, well, hey, I used 500 2x4s and this and that and the other, and then I'd actually be billing out of the job cost module and everything, and sending AR invoices to a customer out of job cost, to bill them for a 50% progress billing on a home. But I don't get the feeling that you guys really want to do any type of invoicing on the AR side out of job cost. It's really more just capturing cost information, whether it's from AP or inventory or from sales orders. That's right.
You're kind of accumulating stuff in there. So basically what I was saying is that the features that I showed you today, do those seem like they would cover your needs for what you want to track?
Yeah, I mean, we won't bill from it, but we definitely have a variety of costs that get allocated to jobs, right? So obviously, it's all the procurement, it's all the production time, it's a raw material allocation, it's travel costs when they go to install the machines. So yeah.
Okay. Cool. So, so as long as we know that we're not billing out of AR, there's a chunk of complexity that comes on the billing side. So if we're just capturing costs and that's the main purpose of it, then that's pretty much enough. Do we need to worry about bringing across any historical jobs, or is it going to be like a going forward type thing where we're just putting new jobs in the system and tracking them?
It'll be all going forward.
Okay, so no no historical jobs. Okay. So yeah, then we're talking about our bucket of custom stuff. With regards to other custom stuff, anything else come to mind? We've got BOM import and the job cost information that you may want to bring in. Anything other than that comes to mind? Any significant items?
No, I don't think so. So it's just like the out of the box H100, you get the bill of materials module. That's all included. Correct. In there. Okay.
Yeah, everything I've showed you today is out of the box. There's a couple times where I talked about additional things you could get, which I'll note those because I'm going to forward you on information about those. There's a couple things that I mentioned, but everything else is just out of the box I've showed you.
Okay. And the only other thing that I saw on the previous module, and I referenced it a couple times, and then Brian referred to it, was it was called, I think it's called Component Manager. Component Exception Manager. And I don't know, that could have been an older module, so it might not even be part of your application offering, but it looked interesting, and it looked like a way that if you were working on multiple jobs and you're building out this bill of material for each of them, that you would pull up this component manager and you could buy across multiple jobs if you're buying things from the same vendor.
Yeah, there's actually that was one thing I did not show you, just the core stuff. Do you want me to show you right now? I mean, I've got time if you got time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So let me go ahead and share my screen again. And because yeah, so there are some reports that you can get from, let's see, summarize bill of materials, used component requirement report. And so this allows you to like reference a specific bill number, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we said, we can do the vents. And so the base report will show you, okay, well, you've got this many required, and here's what you've got available of any given item. So basically of any, if I were to manufacture one vent, here's what I would need, and here's what I actually have right now on hand. And so it does give you, it's not as fully developed, as the production management software. So I won't even try and say that it is. You do have the ability to see some of that. And then the other thing too is that that's one of those things. If it's just one report where you're saying, well, hey, I just want to see it, like, I'm not trying to automate anything necessarily. I just want to get my totals across all of my sales orders for all of the bill of materials that are on them, and just get a list of what do I have and what do I need. And that's something that we could design, within, like, for that, we could create a custom view in SQL that gathers all that information and organizes it how we want to see it, and then create a custom report and just add it onto the menu, so you could use it as kind of a purchasing tool that says, hey, if I wanted to fill every sales order as of today, what do I need to order? Like, what do I need to have on, on hand?
Right.
And so it'd be, for lack of a better word, it's kind of I don't want to say a poor man's version, because it may work well, for what you guys are trying to do. But it will be, maybe a little bit more manual process in the sense that you have a report to run, but it's not going to automate the ordering of those items, right? It's just going to give you the information for, well, here's what you need. And that's something that we could easily enough do from just doing a custom report. But I don't know, what do you think? Do you want to look at the other one? Should we talk to Brian about getting that, or go ahead?
Well, why don't I take another look at a view of the module? make sure I understand it the right way, and then maybe I could take a couple screenshots of it and then send it to you, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, no, that'd be just fine. Okay, I'm looking at our gross requirements report. Yeah, so it's these two reports, the component requirements and the gross requirements. So you could add in a bunch of different bill numbers and quantities that would go on to them. And so it gives you what you would need. It's just a little bit, yeah, it's forcing you to kind of tell the system what you want to display on the report, as opposed to
I mean, like the last thing I want to end up doing is having to like go generate a report to then go manually build a fully loaded like purchase order. So.
Right. Yep. Understood. Cool. So yeah, I'll ping Brian, and I'm sure you go through the video again. Having seen Sage 100 in a bit more detail, now you can kind of compare them side by side and be like, oh, I see what that's adding.
Right.
And then you can decide if it's something you want to bring in or not. So yeah. So I think that gives me enough information to be dangerous. So I may shoot you an email if there's anything that I missed. Then I may shoot you an email and just get a couple holes filled. But generally speaking, yeah, like I said, we've got what we need, and so it's yeah. So by tomorrow, morning, mid-afternoon, and I'll just reach out to you, and we'll send you. You have a version ready of the stuff to send you, and can walk through it, make sure there's no questions on it.
That's perfectly fine.
What does your schedule look like tomorrow? Maybe we just book something out now, and I'll just make sure to have it ready.
Yeah, whatever time works for you, I can make work.
Okay. I'll tell you, I'll ping Brian. He may want to sit in for that.
Sure.
And yeah, so I'll go ahead. I'll ping him, and then we'll figure out what time tomorrow. Because I'm flexible tomorrow as well. So I'll check with Brian. We'll get you a time sent over. And then we'll have it ready to go by then.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, appreciate your time. Took a little over 2 hours.
All right.
So apologies for that. But
that's okay. All right, have a nice evening.
Take care. We'll see you.
All right, bye.